Just before we move on from that, I think, can we give a little bit of context to what was happening in 1938 in Hungary? Because that was a very important year for the escalation of the Holocaust in Hungary. So Hungary had
Okay,
lost
what
quite
would
a
you
lot of.
like to talk about in 38?
So just briefly, the Treaty of Trianon. So obviously, Hungary was on the Austro-Hungarian Empire was on the losing side of World War One, and they had land taken. They did a Everybody knows about the Treaty of Versailles, but not a lot of people know about the Treaty of Trianon. And Hungary
So
had,
the
had
Treaty of
ceded quite a.
Trianon is a very interesting subject because the Treaty of Trianon was made in 1920, and it's often referred as the peace dictate of Trianon, and it was prepared at the Paris Peace Conference and was signed uh, in the chateau of the Grand Trianon in Versailles in 20. So it formally ended World War One between the Allies and the Kingdom of Hungary, and this is when the Kingdom of Hungary became small. So all those territories that now belong, the Hungarian territories that belong now to Slovakia, Slovenia, Romania, they were cut from Hungary. Now, the modern historiography is very interesting because the treaty is perceived so there is a lasting impact on Hungarian politics and culture, um, and they call it a tragedy, a trauma. There's a study which says that two-thirds of Hungarians agreed in 2020 that parts of the neighboring countries should belong to them. The
Yeah,
highest percentage of in
I
any
just wanna I just want to inject a word. There's a word called irredentism, which means that you
Mhm.
have grievances about getting the land back. So Hungary after Trianon, it was it was very traumatizing for Hungarians that they'd had so much land and prestige taken away from them, and there was lots of irredentist claims. So they wanted to reclaim some of their former glory, but they wanted this land back. And as Nazi Germany grew in prestige and power in the 1930s, you have a movement economically first, starting in 1934, towards Nazi Germany as a geostrategic partner. And then in 1938, at the Vienna Accord, Hungary is ceded territory from Slovakia by Nazi Germany. So Hungary has invested interest
Yeah.
in establishing a strong ties with Nazi Germany, and then they start to institute anti-Semitic laws in Hungary. But there's one thing that I want to mention before we move on past
Let's not forget
1938.
about let's not forget about the numerus clausus, which was in 20.
Yes,
Okay, so
that's
that
what I
was
was just going
already
to mention.
yeah. Hmm.
Exactly. I was just going to mention that. So Hungary was the first post-World War country to introduce anti-Semitic law in Europe, and this is really interesting because often I think there's a historian called Georges, maybe like Georges or Georges Mosse, and he said had had he not known who had perpetrated the Holocaust, but he just knew it had happened and it had been perpetrated by a European country, he would have said, who would know the French could be so cruel? And the point that he's making is that lots of countries in Europe were very anti-Semitic, and there wasn't anything. The warning signs weren't really there decades back before the 1930s. Germany wasn't especially anti-Semitic if you're considering France, Russia, Poland, Hungary, obviously the first country to introduce anti-Semitic laws. So it's about that perspective because now we know about the Holocaust. We always see Germany as the central anti-Semitic country in Europe, but what we
Yeah, so
learn
this
if
is
we look at it.
true. when we are talking about the Hungarian Holocaust or the Holocaust in Hungary, then two very, very odd facts are there on the table. That the anti-Semitism and the implementing of anti-Jewish laws started very early in Hungary, and then in the same time, Hungary accepted the Slovak, the Polish, and other refugees, which increased the safety feeling of the Hungarian Jewry. So they felt safe in Hungary. And then the second fact is that the occupation, the German occupation, and the Germans marching into Hungary, and the evacuation of the Jews, they started when already all the people of the world knew what's gonna happen with them. So it was in that phase of the war when, for example, in Italy and in the Soviet Union, the front was already moving backwards. And in spite of this, almost or more than 600,000 Hungarian Jews were deported and evacuated, killed, murdered from Hungary.
Yeah.
So these two facts are very, very.
Yeah, the second fact, and for people that don't know about the Holocaust in Hungary, I think this is one of the most astonishing things about it, and it's shocking, and it adds an extra layer of tragedy when the Holocaust in Hungary. There had been thousands of people murdered before 1944, but it's the spring of 1944, so March 1944, where Admiral Horthy, the leader of Hungary, had put out peace feelers to the Allies. So he's trying to broker for peace, because by this point Stalingrad's happened. It's obvious to everybody that Nazi Germany is, to say the least, on the retreat, and to be involved in the Holocaust at this late stage is quite astonishing. But Hungarians probably, understandably, thought that they wouldn't suffer the same fate as the countries around them, because they were still alive in 1944, and the height of the killing of the Holocaust had been in 1942. And Horthy puts out these peace feelers. The Germans have got an intelligence network that find out that he's trying to broker for peace, and they fully occupy Hungary. And then Eichmann comes in with a team of around 100, maybe 200 people, a small group of people come in, finds willing collaborators in the Hungarian establishment, and in 54 days...
And they implement the deportations in a few weeks.
Yeah, 54 days.
In a very organized way.
54 days they ghettoize, and then in another 54 days... hundreds of thousands of people have been shipped to Auschwitz and murdered there. And this is the context of the resistance movement that David Gur was involved. So so during this time of the Holocaust in Hungary, what exactly did David Gur, what exactly did he do, and what role did he play?
So he went to Budapest from Okany, and he started to learn useful trades to be living in Palestine afterwards. And then while he was working as a building, so this was in 38, 39.
Yeah.
38, 39. So he started building, working at constructions for a Jewish contractor, and then he began to take part in the underground activities of the Hashomer Hatzair movement. It's a Zionist. It was always a Zionist, and it still exists, a Zionist youth movement, which included helping refugees arriving from the neighboring countries. And then in March 1944, when the Germans, we say it invaded or occupied Hungary, but David Gur says that the Germans just arrived to Hungary. They just walked into Hungary. Nobody was against them, that they just occupied. So that's why he doesn't stand the word when I'm using it or when anyone else is using this, that invaded or occupied Hungary. It's not true, according to him, and I respect that. So when the Germans came into Hungary, the underground created a United Defense Committee, and then they started forging documents. So the first, he was a very good writer, like his hands were very smart. I don't know how you say it in English, sorry. So he could write very nicely and draw. And then he became one of the organizers and also the forgers of documents. So the first thing for them, for this youth, was that they had to go into illegality. So they had to forge for themselves the documents, and then all the rest came after that. There was a lot of activities what they were doing. They had to set up more workshops, so they had everything in a suitcase, so they could move the workshops from one apartment to another, and then they set up orphanages. They were feeding the children in the orphanages. They sent messengers to villages and to the countryside to let the Jews of the countryside know what's happening in Budapest, and then they were smuggling people to Romania from Hungary. So these huge activities they were doing, and it was and the number who they saved, how many people they saved. It's a very interesting thing because it always changes. So we don't.
Yeah,
really
difficult to know, isn't it? Difficult to know exactly who was saved by these documents. There's a couple of interesting things. Let's move towards the article then. So.